podcast. Thank you guys so much for being here. Before we get started, Theportcitypythons.com, we have some animals available. We have our honey project is coming out already, and the ghosts and everything like that. Everyone's getting up on the website slowly but surely as they get eating. Other than that, we also have some eastern black king snakes that just hatched out. So if you guys are interested in those, hit me up. We already have a little bit of a waiting list for them. Other than that, we do have, of course, as always, things like springtails and shirts available on the website. So today's show, got that out of the way real quick. Today we have John Scarbrough of Geckoboa. So John keeps and breeds multiple animals in the Eublepharis genus, and he can correct me if I totally mess that up. So John, thank you so much for being here. How you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. So let's get into a little bit of how you got interested in reptiles.
I think it's more along the lines of DNA when it comes to interest in reptiles. So, yeah, I think I got the gene for the rock flipper and the guy with the flashlight at night. You know, I'm not scared of the dark. I want to go out there and look for reptiles. So, I've been like that since I was a kid and just loved it, man. So I was in all animals in general from a young age, and I think at a certain point I kind of realized that my reptile interest and my animal interest wasn't probably going to pay the bills, and so I got into the corporate world, and I did that for a while. And then a friend of mine gave me a boa constrictor I think it was about 2005 or so. And when I got that boa constrictor, I started looking back on the internet, and the whole world kind of opened up to me. And I realized there was lots of different morphs and lots of different ways to go with this. And I just got really excited about it again and just went after it. So that time I was still doing my professional career, still the corporate world, but I started buying constrictors with every last dollar that I have at that point. So one boa turned into 5 really quickly, like most of us is the situation. So I think around 2009-ish, my wife at the time, girlfriend, went to a reptile show with me, and she bought a pair of leopard geckos. And I was taking care of the boa constrictors, and they were all in the same room. So leopard geckos were in the same room as the boa constrictors. And so I just kind of realized how easy they were. And she started getting eggs right away and producing new geckos right away. And I was like, man, what am I doing with these boas? They're just taking so long. And 2010, I think 2009 or somewhere around there, I just went from corporate world and I just said, screw it, I'm done. I'm cutting all my credit cards and I'm just going hardcore reptiles. And I went after the leopard geckos full steam and never looked back since. So that's general story of it. So
were you actually breeding and selling previous to quitting your job, or was this kind of a thing where you built up a kennel?
Very little. Boa constrictors were tough, and I had some really cool ones, and I look back at it now and I still like reminisce on the times I had some of those really awesome Pucallpa Peruvian boas from Rio Bravo, and some of those, I really like those locality boas back then. And it's one of those things where, yeah, they're awesome, and I wish I had them still, but it's just part of the learning curve, and I'm happy where I'm at. I've gone through a lot of struggles with reptiles, and a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and I think I've worked with a lot of species of geckos, a lot of different species of monitors, and I think I'm happy where I'm at now. I enjoy where I'm at.
I
So
think I don't think a lot of people realize that typically keepers go through like a few different phases before you find exactly what sticks. So like it seems like you were messing with some boas, and it seems like now, I mean, how many boas do you have in your collection?
0. I cut out most of them in probably 2012 because I moved from California to Colorado, and boas are just very difficult to move. So I cut out a lot of them at that point, and I wasn't. It was one of those things where it was really hard for me to let go of. But over time, my interest was just drawn more to leopard geckos, and if anything that people get out of the show is just, leopard geckos are not just that new person species or newbie species or whatever you want to say. They're really kind of a fun species to work with. And it's the reason why they're so popular. It's kind of like ball pythons in a lot of ways. A lot of different morphs, but there is a lot of excitement with how the different species within the genus are, they're very, very different. There's a lot of different diversity within that genus. So lots to work with there, and a lot of fun because they're egg to egg within, 10 months.
Yeah, that's what's so crazy is that when most people are even just getting into it, you're still only a few months away from breeding. And then often a lot of times the animals look like they could be, around breeding size by the time they're ready to sell, often, at shows that I go to.
Oh yeah. Female ovulates typically around 8 to 10 months, but could be earlier, could be later. Average is always 1 year. So that's the thing you got to think about. So they're not always going to be 10 months. They're going to be a little bit more, a little bit less. They still follow a season. So they're going to, start ovulating around, spring. Some people are a lot earlier. I'm very late. So most of my stuff doesn't start ovulating until like June, July. This year, extremely late. So yeah, it's still average around 1 year, but 1 year egg to egg, and you can see your progress on your animals. It's very nice, like with boas, for instance, it was 4 years for females, a little bit less for males. It's tough when it's like that.
So what is because obviously there's a lot of plus sides to the animals, both being, growing up to maturity quick and also being, somewhat simple to breed. So what are some of the downsides of that? I mean, it seems like the market would move like very quick in comparison to others.
Yeah, I think you see a lot of things like some advantages too, because you don't see quite the difficulties in like other reptiles where, for instance, with leopard geckos, it's extremely important not to cross albinos, not to cross genetic strains that are confused. So if you cross two snows, for instance, and you can't tell which snow you got, that's a problem. Or albinos, for instance. Albinos are incompatible. So there's 3 albino strains. There's Tremper, Bell, and Rainwater or Las Vegas albino. And they're all incompatible. So if you cross those strains, you'll get normals basically out of the geckos or just wild types. So if you're breeding all these geckos together and you have no idea what you're getting, like it just ends up being a big problem with that in general. So,
I mean, is this kind of though, if you're someone who is interested in keeping things pure and doing the proper record keeping and making sure all your, I's are dotted and T's are crossed, I mean, doesn't that give you such an advantage since so many people are reckless with it? Or
yeah,
do you also fear
it's
about
honestly crazy to me how many people are just, whatever about it and don't care. And it's not that hard to me. Like I mean, be honest about everything and, do your best to with leopard geckos, a lot of people think I think breeders go either mill style where they're producing hundreds of thousands of leopard geckos for like the pet trade, because they're a very good starter reptile for people like PetSmart or whatever. Or they go, like they're just doing it on the side and they're not really caring about it at all. So I'm kind of in between that, and I just do really high end stuff. And it's worked out pretty well for me, and I think that's the way to go with it. Reptile or leopard geckos in general are just a lot of fun. You get a lot of variation when you're hatching out stuff. It's kind of like ball pythons in that sense, but there's a lot more line bred aspect to it, which is fun. So like the line bred, like if you breed two tangerines to like another tangerine, and you get something that's kind of weird looking and you can expand on that, that's fun, and every year you're hatching them out. It's quick too. It's not 4 years till you see what the next result is. You're looking at a year to see what happens with that. So it's a lot of fun with that. But so also I think we're seeing a bigger problem is, I don't know with other different species, but some of the other species that have morphs that are like kind of close together, that kind of look like each other, they might be things that you can't tell the difference between each other. So when you're trying to sell that to a customer, you might not know if, for instance, with leopard geckos, you might not know the difference between Enigma and a white and yellow. And you might sell that to a customer as an Enigma white and yellow. And I don't know how any breeder actually can sell that and say that they're sure about those genetics. It just doesn't make sense. Even with like snows or like, some of the other genetics, it's like really hard to even tell if for sure if something is a snow. You can say, what I usually say now is I say snow for sure, or I say probable snow or possible snow, or it's in the genetics. So I think some of the other reptiles out there, you guys do corn snakes, right?
Which is eerily similar to what you're
talking I think about. You guys are kind of getting there in that sense,
because no one's breeding back to normals or say, to prove things out. Everyone's getting an animal, seeing the phenotype and trying to guess what genetics are in it, instead of actually knowing the building blocks and the ingredients that are made or that are put together to make this animal. You'll
get 10 different people in leopard geckos who will tell you the albino, that strain that you got, and they'll get 5 different answers, So it doesn't work that way. The background genetics play everything with that. So because I do a lot of test breeding in this sense, because in leopard geckos, we test for all the albino strains. So if I'm selling a tangerine to somebody and I say, this is a pure tangerine, or say I'm selling a Tremper albino to somebody and I tell them it's pure, I've tested that against all the other albino strains to make sure that it's not, because the leopard gecko world is all mixed up. There's a lot of people that try to make money really quick, and they went from, say, the earlier albino strains like Tremper and Rainwater, and then they went into like Bell albino. And to make a Bell albino have the Eclipse gene, which was in Tremper, which is like an eye pigment gene in leopard geckos. To add that in, they used to breed what's called raptors or Tremper Eclipse in leopard geckos. So they used to breed those into Bell albinos, and then try to produce albinos out of that to create what's called radars now, but which is a Bell Eclipse. So 3 albino strains in leopard geckos: Tremper, Rainwater, Bell. They have Tremper, which is with Eclipse is called Raptor. With Bell, it's called Radar. With Rainwater, it's called Typhoon. So they try to skip some steps and put that Eclipse gene into Radar or into Bells real quick, and all of a sudden you got a mix up. So you get people that are breeding Bells together, and they're not getting Bell albinos, they're getting Tremper albinos out of that. So,
I mean, you can see why they're confused, though. You have 3 strands of
albinism.
You're just asking for people to mess it up, right?
Well, it's something to think about with other reptiles in general. If you got like, I didn't notice it when I was breeding boas, like the confusion and people being worried about that. But I'm sure with corn snakes, they got some things that are easily confused. And with leopard geckos, it's really common. And the fact that it's kind of like the fruit fly thing, where fruit flies just produce real fast. With leopard geckos, we produce real fast. And so we realize the problems real quick with that kind of stuff. So that's why, and it's also like with breeders like me, I can't compete with the big mill breeders that are producing hundreds of thousands of leopard geckos a year. So they might, produce really nice stuff, from a visual aspect, but it's still not sound genetically. You don't know what's in it, so you might have 3 different albinos in that gecko you get from PetSmart or wherever.
Yeah, I was about to say it might be something similar to where we see people get amazing corns. Actually, a guy today was just messaging us his snake from Petco. Amazing snake. I think it's like a 4-gene animal. But guess what, man? I don't know. I can't tell you what type of anery that is. I can't tell you what's going on there.
And PetSmart's most definitely not.
So it's like, yeah, so we must have exactly the same thing in the same market. And I'm wondering kind of because obviously, corn snakes, the wholesale market is a lot of people's bread and butter. They produce 10,000 corn snakes, 100,000, I don't know. But as someone who's kind of in the designer realm, like kind of somewhere where we fall in corn snakes as well, like how big is your collection?
I'm not huge, but I'm not small either. So I'm not a mill breeder. I'm the only employee, quote unquote. So I take care of everything. I keep a lot more babies than I do actually like breed adults. So like I have a lot of adults that I don't breed every year. And I kind of keep a genetic library. So I have a lot of males and a lot of females. And that way I have the choice every year. And when I'm thinking about it, like when I go to breed, it's super focused. I'm like on that. Like if I'm not in the right mind to breed like geckos, I just go and watch YouTube or do something else. When I'm ready to go, I go for it. And I have notes down and I think about things. Like there's a lot of stuff I've written down and I don't know, like I really it's a zone where I go into and I pair up probably 30, 40 females at a time in that sense. And I have certain males where I know like that's the male, like that guy is going to get the job done. He's a good breeder. He's freaking unbelievable when it comes to what he produces. And so I know that male is going to be what I want to pair up with a lot of these females. But there's a lot of little side projects that I have where I just am like, see where this goes. Just try it, do it, and figure it out like as it goes. And maybe I hatch out something cool. Maybe I don't. Usually I don't. 99% of the time the babies are just like your average. I mean, everything I breed is pretty cool for at this point, but there's a lot of stuff that doesn't produce anything spectacular. So, but when you're breeding like the best of something else, and you kind of know the lines really well, you do get a few things that are like really exceptional throughout the year. So yeah, it's fun. That's the best part about it. Like I bred a lot of species of geckos, and it's just the excitement of the incubator and seeing what's in it and seeing all the little geckos that hatch out each day. Like I'm in there with a flashlight, like shining and seeing what's going on in there. And, if there's something new, most of the time not, of course, but at the same time, it's like really cool to see new geckos that hatch out. And I know exactly my pairings when I write it on the deli cup that they hatch out of. I know exactly what pairings come out of them. So I'm like, instantly, I'm like, that's what happened with those two, you know? So it's fun. It's exactly why I breed leopard geckos at this point. It's fast. It's instant gratification. It's fun. They're in your face. They're just like, this is what I am. And, you know, every year, if you're doing it full time like I am, it becomes a lot of fun. So
is that something to where obviously like you're seeing new things pop out? Do you mean like different variations of things that you haven't seen before that you may hold back and see like is something inheritable? Or are those kind of things, are they variable in that sense?
Well, there's definitely, like, for leopard geckos, a lot of it's line bred, or polygenic. So you're just breeding an orange gecko to an orange gecko, and you're seeing what comes of that. Hopefully, a more orange gecko, you hold back, you breed it back. There's problems with that, and there's things that are fun about that. So the problem is that you could get to inbreeding really quick. But the fun of it is that you can produce some really cool stuff fast too. So I'm doing that constantly. So I'm constantly trying to breed the best stuff that I have and breed it to this line or that line. But when I have with leopard geckos, like, or reptiles in general, you can inbreed them a long time and they're fine. But when you inbreed them too much, there's obviously issues. So when I try to sell to customers like, hey, this is a gecko genetics blood cross or whatever, and I sell it with a female, I want to make sure that that animal is going to produce good geckos for that customer. Because I think about it from my perspective, and I'm like, would I want to breed that? Is that some pair that I want to breed? Is that something that's healthy? Is that something that the gecko is really going to be, you know, say, and I got to think down the line too, because a lot of these customers are going to take those babies and pair them together and sell them to another customer that's going to breed them together. So luckily, reptiles in general can inbreed a lot before they have big issues. But we are definitely victims in leopard geckos for the same factor that leopard geckos are year to year from egg to egg. So there's a lot of reasons to be careful about that. So for instance, like some of the melanistic, which are really like hyper melanistic, they're just like more dark colored than other geckos. Some of the lines are like black knight, black pearl, charcoal. I've heard black velvet before, but I work with all of them. But the problem is if you're working with a line that's been worked with for 15 plus years, which one of the most popular lines is, I won't mention it by name because people get upset about it, but
even I know about it.
I know about it only because we talked about it on another podcast.
Yeah, really black little gecko, that little tiny black gecko that's super black.
Dark as night.
Like, wow, that's amazing. It's melanistic. It's amazing. Yeah, that thing's got genetic problems like you wouldn't believe. You probably, how many geckos suffered because of that one gecko coming out, right? So that's now that gecko, that line that you're talking about is 20 years line bred, 20 years, and there are big issues with it.
So when does line breeding turn into inbreeding?
Well,
like you know, because every line is just means that it's inbred to a certain degree. So how do you make sure that that doesn't happen? I mean, what would you do if you had to start over again with something like that?
Well, I wouldn't go that far for sure. I think it was about 13 years before they released those. But I have black pearl charcoals, which are separate from black knights, which I bred to black pearl or to black knights that have produced really dark animals, like right off the bat. So if I was just doing the black knights, like the dark geckos that everybody talks about, I would just say try to breed it to a wild type that was as dark as possible, which my thought was about 2 years ago, which was Eublepharis macularis montanus, which is not really probably a subspecies, but that's what it is in literature right now. But anyway, I would probably breed it to those in captivity because those are pretty dark. They're not snow, but they look like snows, and they can probably add a lot of genetic diversity to that line. Now I say breed them to black pearl charcoal crosses. Black pearl charcoal crosses are not as dark. They're nowhere as like really like just solid melanistic like that other line is, but they add a lot of genetic diversity to that line. And there's a lot of vigor that adds to that line with that. And that's everything that I'm doing with that line. I won't breed a pure black knight anymore, no matter what. Just too many problems. Just small females lay way too many, way too less of eggs compared to what's normal. Tons of issues.
Because of the threat of inbreeding causing various problems, have you noticed an increase in the gecko community of people wanting to do like breeding loans and breeding projects and like trying to share more of what they have to kind of?
No, I've always seen that, but it's very rare that I ever take anybody up on a. I don't do breeding loans no matter what anymore. I get sometimes I have a friend that will pressure me and try to be like, hey, just send me this for that, you know, but I never do it anymore. And I'm sorry to that friend if they ever upset about it or whatever. I keep a very close collection now. I spent over $20,000 testing for crypto in my collection. So I sent out PCRs for every one of my breeder adults, at least 4 times for every female adult that I have now. So that's on a discount too. I like literally every one of my geckos poops has been tested 4 times to test for crypto.
Can you go over a little bit of the process? Because obviously in corn snakes, we're worried about crypto as well. So what's the process to get a collection like yours? I mean, all tested.
I'm sure I don't know if it's the exact same strain of crypto as is in leopard geckos. I think it's a different strain, and I think it's the snake strain. But you can get them tested through animal genetics, which is a parrot. They make most of their money through testing parrot like sex DNA. Basically, they're testing for what sex the parrot eggs are or whatever. So you can send all your samples to them. So with leopard geckos, if you want to send it to animal genetics, you take a dry piece of poop. Don't take a wet piece. You don't have to have a wet one. That's not necessary. It's DNA that we're talking about here. So it's not necessary that you don't have to have a live specimen.
The steamier, the better.
Yeah, they actually prefer it to be dry, which I learned after the fact. But it makes life a lot easier as well. So you can take a dry specimen, you put it, in my experience, you put it in a bag, you put it in another bag, and you send it off to them. And they list their prices. I think it's about $25 a test. If you're doing a lot of tests, you will get a discount. You can call them and ask for that. But I think at like small amounts, they're going to charge you the normal rate, of course. And you can test that out, and they'll send you back the result. And the problem with crypto is that it's not always 100%. You know, it could be 80% or so, which is what I've kind of found. So you got to throw the test in there again. So quarantine, test for crypto. Quarantine some more, test for crypto. I usually test anything I get in now 3 or 4 times.
Wow. So how long exactly are they in quarantine?
I don't really buy many geckos anymore, to be honest. I was buying a lot back in the day, but I just don't buy a lot anymore. I don't really have a need for a lot of geckos anymore. Most of the stuff I have is better. Like, I'm not trying to be cocky or whatever about it, but I think a lot of the stuff I have is better than most stuff I see out there. And then there's just no reason, for me to buy stuff when there's nothing new, so.
Right. And it seems like, I mean, at the point you've matured into your collection to where you're working with stuff that you have a particular eye for and you've bred for years in order to look exactly how you want it. So of course you're going to think that your animals are the best because they look exactly to your specifications. I mean, that's just,
I don't want to come across that way at all. There's a lot of cool geckos out there that I like a lot. There's only so many things you could work with is kind of the way I think of it. And at this point, it's like I have a lot of nice geckos for sure, but most of the stuff like that I see out there, like it's I could add that project, but I don't need another rack of those geckos. I have.
And
enough.
I'm sure as a full-time breeder, the risk of bringing in a new animal far exceeds the reward. I'm sure in many instances. If one thing happens in your collection, I mean, that's your livelihood.
Yeah, I've learned a lot over those years because a lot of geckos have crypto. It's not a joke. It's for the lab that I work with that tests the PCRs on the samples that I send them. They're telling me most of the big chain stores have it, like really common. And it just is common from what I've seen, and I've tested out. Like, it's very common. Some people don't think it is, but the problem with crypto is it's very asymptomatic. So, like, some geckos will show it the problem, some will be just completely fine. They will never show an issue ever, and so you'll have. I don't know if it's the same with corn snakes, but if it was like a gecko would always show the problem right away or, not eat or whatever, it'd be really easy to, separate those out and, keep them away from your collection. But, if there's a male that, like, for instance, like a lot of males don't have a problem with eating at all. They'll just keep eating and they'll just be really healthy. And then if they had crypto, for instance, they would breed all your females. If you were one of those breeders that just paired a ton of males to females, you just infect your whole collection. And it's tough because of that situation. It's very asymptomatic, and it's a big problem for sure.
Yeah, same thing in corn snakes, similar things to Nido and carpet pythons, Morelia, even ball pythons. You see, it seems to be dormant. There's no way to detect it, and then even some of the tests, they don't work unless they are. I forget what the term is, but basically they can only. You can have an animal test negative and then positive and then
False
negative,
positive,
and all over the place.
I've had that too. The crypto, it's back and forth, and I've had males sit on the side. I still have them actually. They tested positive like 5 years ago, and then I just keep them on the side and keep testing them.
Yeah. Now is like 100% positive? Is that something that you got to call?
No. That's the worst part too. It's like 100% positive. When they say positive, is definitely not positive. And I thought from the beginning, I was like, okay, if they're positive, they're doing a DNA test here. It's a PCR test. They're like actually amplifying the DNA here. It doesn't work that way for some reason. And I started packing, like when I would put those fecal samples in a bag, I would put them in one bag and then another bag and then another bag before I send it off to them. So I was like, there's no possible way they're getting them like mixed up. So either A, they're getting mixed up at the lab somehow, or B, they're just, it's not definite. Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay, this might be a dumb question. Is
That's how all good questions start.
Obviously, the
Best.
more people that are sending in these collections of feces, is that creating a better, more accurate result?
No, because, well, for one, 99% of leopard gecko breeders are not sending anything in. You know, it's just the fact of the matter. I know for a fact because I talk to the guy regularly, and he's like, there's a vet from the big chain pet stores from each side of it that sends it in, but other than that, nobody sends in anything. And I know a few people send in like a random sample here or there, but not gonna do anything.
And I think it's unfortunate that most people are going to get their first gecko from those people, and they're going to have a negative first experience, which is unfortunate because that should be an animal that, you know, is a great beginner animal and they should have a good experience with.
Yeah, it's part of the problem with leopard geckos. Like, if you have a disease like that goes through the collection and takes out a lot of the collection, you know, it's a bad first experience, you know, and a lot of people get upset about it. So, I don't know what to say. It's a problem for sure. But if you can buy from good sources and not, you know, if you're not buying from your local chain store and doing your homework, you will figure it out. And, you know, it's a fun species to work with. I don't have any problems anymore. No problems like that, like I used to deal with, you know, and it was from other breeders for sure. Like, I would get geckos from other breeders that just had issues.
Yeah, and I hope that at the very least, we can take an example since the leopard gecko breeding. I mean, you guys are so mature as far as you've gone much further, obviously, because like you mentioned, your animals breed quicker. So you can kind of be an example of things like inbreeding, what not to do for us going forward, biosecurity, obviously, crypto, nido, all the things that are in our captive animals. I mean, it seems like all of those problems are showing through, and it's kind of a little bit scary. It seems like it's like one of the biggest issues facing the hobby from a like keeping and breeding standpoint.
Yeah, it's for sure an issue. And I mean, some people, they don't worry about it much, but you know, there's a lot of people that go through leopard geckos really quick, and you can kind of find the ones that are just in it for the money or whatever reason they're in it for. They think they're in it for the money, I guess I should say it. So it's not an easy business. Like, I mean, any reptile is not an easy business. You got to really have a passion for the animals first, you know, before you go into the money aspect of it, I guess. So
yeah, well, let's move on to brighter things other than depressing. So are you keeping, I know people back in the day used to keep breeding groups, but it seems like people kind of moved away from that. How do you keep as far as individuals and then breeding?
So what I recommend to beginners, which is almost everybody that's going to be listening to this, I recommend keeping females by themselves. So I don't recommend pairing up females with multiple females. I recommend you can keep a male with female the whole year. Just watch them closely. But you can have issues when you start pairing up a lot of females in one bin. Like a lot of breeders do like 3 females and 1 male for every 32 quart tub. And that ends up being a lot of issues. A lot of biting, a lot of pulling off tails, I mean, yeah, they're probably going to survive. They're going to live through a tail that falls off, you know, but for the most part, one female. If you're going to breed the female, put them in with the male one time a year for a week or so. And then other than that, you know, keep them by themselves. They don't want to be with other geckos. Trust me. They prefer it. They hate other geckos. It's like we always think like, oh, they want a friend or whatever. It's not that way with geckos, for sure. Geckos want to be alone and they want to have their spot where they can just chill and relax. They just want to relax all the time. No other jerks hanging around them, you know?
Yeah. And do you find that males, can you stretch them too thin? Do you need to be kind of sparse with who you put them in with?
Yeah, the males can, if you get a male so a first year male, for instance, will have some issues. Usually they don't, because I transition first year males from mealworms to superworms or dubia. If there's almost every gecko takes the dubia quick, but the problem is dubia is tough to breed enough and tough to buy enough if you're doing a large collection. So I try to transition enough of them to superworms where I don't have to worry about that. But sometimes I'll take a first year male, put him with a female that will only take dubia, and all of a sudden he gets hooked on it too.
What?
And I'll throw him in with another female that wants to only take superworms, and so he won't eat as much. So, but at the same time, they always go back to mealworms if I ever take them back to that. And dubia is always an option too. The leopard geckos have to get super thin before they won't take anything else. And a lot of people think that they have to be super fat and it's just not the case. Leopard geckos, and naturally they're thin and they're eating whatever they can. The fact is that when we get them in captivity and we feed them something, they just, like with dubia, they're just taking to it because it's a really nice prey source and it's what they love, and they're going to eat a ton of it, so they'll take superworms at a point and it's still healthy. A leopard gecko that's thin, not overly thin, is healthy still, as long as it's gotten to the point where it's ready to eat like superworms or dubia or whatever.
Are there any visual markers on what makes a skinny gecko / fat gecko?
So not really, but if you see a gecko that really gets kind of like a dull appearance to it, or the tail really shrivels up and it's kind of I don't know, wrinkly, I guess would be the way to describe it. If you get a tail on the gecko that's shrivelly and to that extent, yeah, that gecko is probably dealing with something else rather than just hunger strike or that it's ovulating. Because a lot of people don't. This is the big problem with leopard geckos too, is a lot of people that are new to reptiles, they get a leopard gecko and they'll get a female, and they'll get a female right in the breeding season. So they'll get one that's ovulating, and that female will not eat. It won't eat for me. It won't eat for you. It won't eat for anybody. The thing is fat still, and you don't realize it because you don't know what a leopard gecko looks like in the wild. A leopard gecko in the wild looks like a really skinny, shriveled tail gecko. But in the wild, it doesn't care about food or anything at that point. And people freak out about it. And it's your gecko's still super fat. Don't worry. It's going to go through about 2 to 3 months where it's ovulating, and then it's going to kick out of it, and then it's going to eat a ton for you. So that's every year. I put an extra note in my shipments for every gecko that I think that's going through that, and that way most of the new customers or new people that don't understand leopard geckos understand that.
And not freaking out.
Yeah, reptiles in general are not going to eat as much as your pet gerbil or pet whatever.
Yeah, many are seasonal. Many have, whether it's males looking for mates or females, going through their own cycle. So you got to be cognizant of that. And is it important, or do you, breed your own insects or breed your own food?
Yeah, I used to breed everything, which is very tough. And so the one thing that takes a lot of breeders out is allergies, and allergies to mealworms, allergies to superworms, and dubia in general will take a lot of breeders out. I'm very lucky that I haven't had those issues, but I wear a mask. I have a ventilation system in my shop. I'm constantly pulling air in and out. I make it a big point to not breathe in much of that.
Do we know exactly what's making people, have allergic reactions to it?
Not exactly. I know a lot of people have taken, David from David's Fine Geckos, who used to have a podcast like yours, just completely out because of those allergies.
Wow.
Sassobek, Paul Allen, a lot of people I know, like smaller breeders too, just completely out.
But it seems like some people are more prone to it than others.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've been breeding my own feeders for a long time, and I haven't had an issue yet. I take a lot of precautions though, just because I know that they can cause problems, but I don't have the allergies for sure. So I wear a mask every day that I work with feeders. I wear a mask when I'm working with my reptiles and in general. I have a big shop fan that's blowing through tons of air real quick. So it's pulling up all the, the calcium and all that other stuff that's in the air. But yeah, a lot of people have big issues with that, and it takes them out of the hobby. So it's not something to take lightly. If you have an issue with reptile feeders, it's definitely not the side of the hobby you should take, because dubia, mealworms are number one to take people out.
And it seems like at least in corn snakes, probably in leopard geckos too, it's so important to control the price and also the availability of your food. So like breeding your own is so pivotal, I know, for us to at least have some mice on hand just to make sure.
Yeah, well, with leopard geckos, I was breeding my own for a while, but at this point, I don't breed any of my worms anymore. I get them all from rainbow mealworms, and then I get them in, I gut load them, and I kind of feed them right before I feed them my geckos. But I don't breed any of those anymore. My goal is to breed all my dubia that I need, but it's been really hard. I breed a lot of dubia, but it's just really tough to keep up with the numbers. So with the leopard geckos, I kind of find that every adult leopard gecko will take to dubia, but they won't take to a superworm. So I breed as many dubia as I can. If there's a leopard gecko that absolutely won't take to a superworm, I'll give it dubia, and then I'll mark the tub and it says dubia at that point. But it's tough. You got to buy a lot. I buy at least $600 worth of feeders every month.
Whoa! Even though you breed.
Oh yeah.
Dubia.
If I didn't breed, it would be probably close to 1,000. But
it's actually not terrible, to be honest, for a collection. I mean, we probably spend.
We do not spend $600 a month.
This time of the year with babies and stuff like that, maybe. But
that's the thing you got to think about too, though, is like every mealworm I get in. So if I order, like I just ordered 6,000 of them for this next week, and I will probably get the use out of 40,000 of them, because a lot of them die. Geckos don't want to eat anything dead. or somewhat like not moving. So with snakes, you can go and defrost a rodent all day.
Right.
And if one doesn't eat, you can feed it to the next or whatever, but with leopard geckos, it's just in the trash every time.
You waste so much of it.
It's a lot of expense thrown down the drain. I won't refeed any feeders that are been in another leopard gecko's tank anymore. So, or enclosure. And that's another, controlling parasites and other things, method. But
so I guess there's not really any sort of reprieve for people who want to have a leopard gecko but have issues with the hierarchy of life and feeding.
You got to feed live.
Yeah, because we get that a lot of times. People are like, "Oh, I really want a corn snake, but like I can't feed it a mouse. It goes me out." And we always direct them to Repulinks. But you're saying like with geckos, you suck it up or you don't get one, basically.
Leopard geckos, you're feeding bugs, so
people don't
find a problem with feeding the.
You
you might feel a little sad about. For instance, I don't feel very sad about feeding a dubia roach to a leopard gecko, but yeah, I do get a little bit like, I don't know. It's just, I think it's part of human nature not to feel a little weird about feeding a live rodent to, or especially a pinky. We used to feed pinkies to leopard geckos.
Really? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's still possible. Some breeders do. You don't need to. It's definitely not necessary, but some leopard geckos breed or feed pinkies to their females that are breeding, but not necessary for supplementing them, right?
Well, I mean, and that's a very healthy perspective rather than those people on Facebook who are throwing up videos and acting like they're super happy when their snake wraps up a live mouse. So, it shows that you're not a sociopath. That's always good.
So in the wild, are geckos always eating live things?
Yep, pretty much. They're so Eublepharis, which is basically all leopard geckos. There's multiple species under that genus, but they're feeding on mostly like sulfigids, which are like your kind of like camel spiders. If you've ever seen those little ugly things from Arizona, but they have those in the Middle East as well. Spiders, beetles, all kinds of things that they're eating at night. So they're eating lots of different prey items. So it's only live. They don't eat any plants out there. It's pretty it's desert to semi-arid. They're not going for anything that's in the tropical environment. No fruits out there for sure.
And I mean, is that a part of contention as far as the leopard gecko, especially some of the rare species that you're working with? The fact that, I mean, they're found in places like Afghanistan and in the Middle East where there's conflict, and maybe, herpetologists don't necessarily go there as readily and do the research on them, or people aren't exactly exporting for new blood. I mean, do you see that as a hindrance? It hinders the hobby as far as getting new blood as well as research?
Well, so what the stuff that I did that had to do with like those new species was a long time ago. For one, two, there's only like 2 biologists that even care about that at all. And maybe one even cares about it now, and he's super old. So, and I've read all his books too. So I don't know. I'm not really that worried about it. I actually worked with the real biologists that are doing this stuff that collected these animals now. We were talking about Agremonu and Fuscus and Hardwicki. I worked with the actual real biologists that are doing the work now. So no biologists in the US are doing anything at this point. We're caught in a little bit of a weird state with those areas. So biologists from the past can't really work there. Biologists that are from other countries like Russia can, which I've dealt with. And then now a lot of biologists from India are working with those species. So yeah, no, nobody really cares. It's not that exciting to them, and I care more about them than they do. So, I mean, what are they going to say to me at this point? I will tell. I've actually worked with a biologist who's working under Aaron Bauer, which is one of the leading biologists in the U.S. It's working on phylogenetics within the genus, and he has found a lot of information from what I have told him. So, I mean, they're not upset with me.
How did the lines of these different geckos, I mean, how did they originate in the U.S. and how do you know that they're pure, at least to the best of your knowledge?
Well, I don't know, so the subspecies, quote unquote, from macularis, which Eublepharis macularis is like your leopard gecko, or scientific name or whatever, Latin name. Those are not known for sure. But we know that they generally range from Pakistan up to Afghanistan, up into India a little bit. Most of them were collected from lower Pakistan. We have Angramanu, which was collected from Iran. So the Zagros Mountains up into Syria and Turkey. And so they live pretty much everywhere in that range. And we have a lot of different localities in that range. Most of mine are from the Iran area. And then we have Eublepharis turkmenicus, which is from lower Turkmenistan, northern Iran. We have macularis, which is leopard geckos, which is Pakistan, northern or up into Afghanistan a little bit, but western Pakistan, which is kind of like Montanus and some of the other quote unquote localities or subspecies, depending on who you're talking to. Up into the Himalayas of India, which would be still macularis. And then when you get into India, they go into Eublepharis fuscus, which is on the west side of India. And then the east side of India, you have Eublepharis hardwicki. And then the middle, kind of in the tiger reserves, hard to say where the boundary is because nobody really knows at this point. And it's something I've been working on a long time, just based off of pictures people have posted and stuff. But in the middle, in like Satpura Tiger Reserve, in Melgot Tiger Reserve, there's a species now called Sapurensis. So Eublepharis sapurensis. I've heard of some people having those in the hobby now. It's probably smugglers, but I mean, one of those things. I'm not super interested in them at this point. They're cool, but
are these common animals in the wild?
I mean, if you're in those areas, yeah. But with you got to look at how they're divided up like their natural boundaries are. So macularis is it has a big boundary in Pakistan, up into Afghanistan. That's a huge boundary. It's a big species that's allopatric, like separation from, say, for instance, Angramanu. Angramanu is in the Zagros Mountains, which is Iran, Turkey, and Syria. And for some reason, those have never been imported into the U.S. So maybe just conflicts with the countries or whatever. But everything we've got with leopard geckos is really just Eublepharis macularis from Pakistan. But I've been working with Angermanu, which I have a few different localities. I have Kermanshah, Choga, which is a Kazakhstan locality, Meshed Soliman, which is a Kazakhstan locality, Elam, which is another locality, and there's more to come for sure. Like if there were biologists collecting them, there would be like 10 more at least.
Yeah, I've never even heard of half the places that
half the
saying.
countries live
No
the
idea.
area or cities.
So if you think you're a normal leopard gecko in Pakistan, which is kind of like, whatever, 40, 50 grams at maturity, you're thinking about a Angermanu in Iran that's 80, 90, 100 grams at maturity, and they mature at almost 2.5 years, where leopard geckos mature at 10 months or so. Very big differences in those species. So they kind of look the same when you're looking at them online, but they're very different in person.
So things like the giants, I don't know if they're exactly called that, but I think they are. The large leopard geckos, I guess. Are they actually pure, just bred to the largest gecko, or are they like a hybrid to make them huge, like these, like the Angermanu? I don't know if this is right.
So they are most likely, because the problem with a giant morph in general, if you had it with any reptile, is trying to figure out if it's really like recessive or incomplete dominant or whatever. It's very difficult to figure out if it's, one of those or just polygenic or, whatever. Giant, I feel after breeding them for 8-10 years or so, I kind of feel like they're recessive. So I feel like they happen when you have those large geckos from a certain breeder, but it could be just line bred. That's the honest truth of it. It could be just line bred. It's just almost impossible to like really figure out, because it's not like an albino where you can say like, this is it, or not.
Right.
It's just like size. And a lot of people breed for oversized geckos. Sometimes people breed, they line breed for oversized geckos. They're just producing like the biggest thing they can. So it's tough. But I've seen, like, when I try to buy directly from the source and only breed those geckos from the source, it's produced really large geckos. But when I cross them to other stuff, it just kind of produces whatever. So that's why I kind of say recessive. But hard to say 100%.
Now,
never going to be like one of those, some people try to say, oh, it's 100% incomplete dominant or co-dominant back then, but whatever.
All Python guys are still running with the co-dom thing.
Co-dom.
You guys. So are there differences in keeping other than just obviously them being
the
larger?
Size.
Yeah. Is there a difference in keeping these animals?
Well, I do a lot of things different probably than any other breeder out there. And it's just because I figured out things myself. So I learned as much as I could from other breeders, and then I keep and do things just that make sense to me. And there's a lot of differences in keeping. Some people think that you need to keep them in really large enclosures for one. I kind of feel it's kind of a weird thing with leopard geckos. They really like smaller enclosures. I don't know why. It may be the fact that in the wild, they want to be in the smallest cramped space as possible. Like if you could picture yourself as having reverse claustrophobia, like that's leopard geckos.
You need it.
Like, like if you had stuff around you and like enclosing you, and then like, you know, I have males that will stop feeding and stop doing anything, and then I throw them in the smallest enclosure possible. I'll throw them in a 6-quart tub, and all of a sudden they're like booming, and they're like ready to go. I don't think it's a permanent situation. Like it's hard to like be completely behind that, but yeah,
I'm sure babies hate open space.
A lot of information online is wrong, and of course with anything with reptiles related, but yeah, it's I'm trying to keep my females in bigger in setups, just in general, and then my males I think males all they want is eat and breed. That's it.
Now,
most males, of course.
If you were to have them in a bigger enclosure, but if you had more like hiding spots, do you think you would still have those feeding issues?
No, for sure not. I have a lot of males in bigger enclosures, and they just want to eat and breed. That's it. Males, I'm not saying females. Females, I think they do appreciate a little bit more space with the enclosure. And I try to keep females in a 32 quart or above. And I'm probably going to expand that just because of what I found. So I want to keep them in. I mean, it's just human nature to keep them in a bigger enclosure than possible. You know what they want, but as long as they have a moist hide, they want to be in small spots. That's their biology, is that they live in the wild where it's a hot desert, arid environment. And when they get to, they spend their days in a crack or crevice in underneath the roots or something where it's really humid
and hidden.
And at night they come out, and that's it. They don't spend their days out in the middle of the heat, you know? So.
And it seems like this would be something where like the microclimate is more important than, you know, the macro, because you would think obviously barren place, it would be, you know, you wouldn't have humidity, but underneath those rocks or in crevices and stuff, you know, it's a different story.
Yeah, for sure. They need humidity more than, you know, people freak out about too much humidity on leopard geckos. I've never seen a gecko get a respiratory issue ever, you know, so give them as much humidity as you can. The shedding issues, like their toes don't shed, is a way bigger issue than, you know, humidity. Gotcha. So they spend their whole days in a crevice, the super humid, under roots, under rocks. It's the most humid spot of the desert. And then when night comes, they come out and it's humid and not too hot, you know? So it's humid all the time for them.
Speaking of enclosures, do you feel that the like enclosure that is sold to most like beginner
leopard starter kit at Petco?
Right. Do you feel like the enclosure that's sold to most beginner leopard gecko keepers is up to the quality it should be? Like for corn snakes, we especially talk about like corn snakes escape very, very easily, and most of the enclosures that are sold are escapable. Like there's not something
or
so
a ball python in a fish tank instead of a rat.
Right. Whatever that is. Dynamic. So do you feel like the, you know, what is being mass produced for leopard geckos is what it should be?
No, not at all, actually. When somebody talks about the enclosure they're getting, it's usually a tank or a Exoterra, which, unless you live in like South Florida, is not going to be humid enough. You know, you need more humidity for pretty much any gecko out there. And so I recommend something that's going to be enclosed a little bit more, has an under tank heater. I actually recommend, I think it's HB Herbs. Let me see if I can even, you can kind of see the tank in the background there.
I like that. Yeah.
I got one from them, but Yeah, it's enclosed as an under tank heater, which is not connected like directly to the floor. It's spaced out a little bit, so it's got a little room to breathe. That works out really good. So you don't have like the humidity loss, and you got enough heat underneath that's coming up, so the leopard geckos can, leopard geckos are bulletproof. So almost anything you do is going to work. Just don't dry them out. Don't screw up the supplementation. Give them enough calcium, vitamin D, vitamin A, and don't screw up the humidity. So give them a good moist height on the hot side. And other than that, you're not gonna. It's really hard to mess them up. But
despite saying that, and this might be a noob question, are there obvious signs for a lack of vitamin A or a lack of vitamin D? Like, what is the initial sign of that?
It's actually a really good question, because vitamin A, when you're breeding, you will notice it as eye issues. So you'll see an eye that's like leopard geckos have eyelids. One of the few species of geckos that actually have eyelids that actually close completely. So if you have a lack of vitamin A, that eyelid will be missing or deformed or small. So vitamin A is very closely associated with eye issues. And for the most part, reptiles in general. So, I mean, if you have a reptile that has a vitamin or an eye issue in general, probably something to do with vitamin A. Something to think about, at least. But with leopard geckos, for sure, if you have a lack of vitamin A in their supplementation, eyelid issues are first to come in babies that hatch out. Other issues that can happen with their eyelids. So, yeah, for sure. Vitamin D, well, you have to have that to use the calcium that you're giving the geckos. So if you don't have vitamin D3, then it's not working.
Right.
The weird thing about leopard geckos, I've tried so many different vitamin supplements and so many different things. And you want something that has a lot more science about it, or a lot more research done to work. But when it comes down to it, osteoform and Vionate mixed 50-50 just always works better than everything. And it's stupid because it's a horse vitamin. I get it. And people don't want to use they want to use the more scientific, whatever.
Something that's marketed to them specifically for that.
Yeah, what all it is marketing with less research and money behind it.
It just comes, maybe there's more research, maybe there's more marketing. I don't know. What comes down to it is what works. And it's what works. And osteoform, especially, whatever's in osteoform, I use it from 50% to up to 80%, depending on when the females are laying and the babies are hatching. Always good results. Everything else I've tried the highest end vitamins you can buy out there. Everything that you can imagine, nothing works good. Oh. So, it comes down to, do you want to, try to figure out something new? And for me, it's just, I really want to do the best for my geckos, and I work hard to do the gut load and all that other stuff. And the vitamins supplementation, it's just one of those things I just got to give up and say, hey, this works. This always works. Nothing else works. So.
Right. And I saw on social media somewhere that you were gut loading. I don't know, the preparation for this gut loading just absolutely ridiculous. So can you kind of explain some of that?
Yeah. So that's a little excessive. So what you were saying, not normal, but it's kind of one of those things where I'm interested in something that's maybe I shouldn't be that interested in it, but like gut loading kind of became my interest for a little while, not so much the breeding of geckos. So, yeah, I just researched a lot about what I should be. I'm gut loading for a lot of geckos. So I'm doing big bales of it every time. I have 100-pound plus tubs of gut load that I make every time. I've had that grinder for a while, and I used to just grind chicken layer mash for a while, just kind of your generic, like whatever, gut load, and just research it more. A lot of it's so on that gut load, basic mix would be chicken layer mash, like 16-18%, somewhere around there. Organic, if possible.
Wait, back it up. Sorry. What is chicken layer mash? In my head, I'm like, is she talking about mashed potato? Like what? You gotta go even further back.
So when you're feeding chickens, chickens and reptiles have a lot of similarities. So like you can assume if the science has been done on chickens, it's probably been done, like it's pretty close to reptiles. So that being said, I used to just do chicken layer mash, which layer just means like the females laying eggs. So they would feed that to the laying females. 18%, 16% means the amount of protein in it, which can vary. I try to go a little higher protein just because I add ingredients that are lower protein. The problem with dubia is if you get too high a protein, you can actually cause gout in your geckos. This is farther along, but just lower amounts of protein for your dubia is good. Even though they might appreciate more protein, they might produce more with more protein, you want a little less. Just if you're using them as a staple for like your geckos or bearded dragons or whatever, you don't want gout. So I use a base of like organic chicken layer, about 16-18%, alfalfa, dandelion, brewer's yeast, marigold.
What store are you shopping at?
What?
Gut loading store.
Is there a gut loading store that you're buying all these ingredients?
Okay, so for all the people that are weirded out by this, just go to like chameleon forums and like look up like Sandra's chameleons. Like she does a lot of work on different gut load like ideas and stuff like that. You want your like anti-nutrients like oxalates and some of those other things to be lower. General gut load, buy like pro gut load from Supreme Geckos, something like that. I don't remember, but it's like pro gut load or pro reptiles, Supreme pro gut load, chicken crack or cricket crack. There's a couple others. Anyway, they're basically buying the same stuff, I'm telling you. So buy that stuff. You don't even have to do that. I'm doing it on such a big scale that, I figure, I don't know, something I'm interested in, stupid, I guess. But yeah. I try to give my geckos the best possible, the mealworms the best possible. And it's weird. I'm not actually feeding the geckos that stuff. I'm feeding the mealworms that I did for the geckos that stuff. So
are you blending all that stuff up?
Yeah, it's that big blender you saw on YouTube or whatever I posted it on. And I blend it all up. Key is don't blend it, like don't use like a bread grinder, like don't use a flour grinder or anything, because you're going to make that material too small and it's going to clog the pores on the mealworms. Use some type of grinder that makes it kind of a little bit, thicker where they can run through it. I know it's kind of weird, but mealworms will die if you get like powder around their pores and stuff. It's kind of like any insect. They get like they clog their pores. It's how they breathe, basically. So if you throw a ton of calcium around them or gut load around them, you're gonna kill them off. So you got to get them. You got to get them a little loose. So what I do is I make that mix, and then I mix in a little wheat brand or something. It's going to be a little more looser, and they can kind of float through it. Yeah, weird. I get it. Doesn't make sense, but you trust me, you'll appreciate it when it comes down to it.
This reminds me of our podcast episode with Dorian. And he's crazy on the food
going
level.
to Asian markets and getting crawfish to certain.
He goes way crazier than just getting like
but
stuff.
But I think that sometimes there's like just more layers of things to geek out about, and like you kind of breeding geckos is probably not your challenge at the moment. You probably got that down pretty well.
You'd be surprised though, like doing the stupid stuff like that I'm doing, my production numbers go up. And so I realized that I'm doing things. I'm doing things right. Like I'm perfecting it. I do a lot of things I won't even tell you about on the air, but secrets.
Nah. You get to play around a little bit.
Yeah. If you're doing this and you don't experiment, you're not doing it right. Trust me. You got to experiment and figure out what works. Like what I'm saying doesn't work for everybody. And I experiment all the time. And it's what's made it work for me. So even you guys do corn snakes or whatever it is, you got to figure out what makes you more efficient, what makes you, what makes the gecko or the snakes thrive, whatever it is,
Yeah, and that's something to where, like, every year you have, obviously you can test things out, but you got to kind of follow the recipe the first couple times, buy the book, then you got it down, and then you start getting a little weird once you got that down. At least that's what I did, and it seems like you probably did something similar as well.
Yeah, I don't do anything like, I guarantee no breeder of my size does it stuff like I do at all. Not even close. So I give little tips and tricks to like some of my friends in the hobby that I want to succeed. Because there's some guys that are like, they're just like, oh, I can't do it anymore. I'm done. This is it. And I'm like, all right, here's the trick. Figure it out. But it's one of those things where, a lot of people just don't want to innovate and figure it out. And it's not that hard for me. I just always try to figure out a better way, better mousetrap to figure it out, So.
As far as experimenting with like babies and everything, we kind of have our own lists we've done of like, okay, when they don't eat this, we try this. Do you have like a kind of list of things you go down when they're not taking those typical food items or different things you do?
Or are they all perfect little eating angels?
With leopard geckos, they don't eat 100%. So it's kind of one of those things where you just have to. So all of them will take to mealworms, but you kind of just have to force feed them that, or not force feed them, just like make them realize that that's what they're going to want to eat. So once they eat it once, they're going to take to it for sure. Occasionally you'll have a baby gecko that won't take to it, and you kind of just have to like rub the mealworm on its like side of its mouth, and it'll finally get the scent of it and it'll eat. But for the most part, leopard geckos are pretty easy. It's not hard like snakes and a lot of stuff. It's just pretty simple to figure it out. So
yeah. And are there any new like are there any morphs that you work in particular that are unique to you or that may have originated in your collection?
So with leopard geckos, there's line bred stuff, which would be like polygenic stuff. So basically breeding like an orange gecko to an orange gecko, you produce another orange gecko. Or bold, for instance, like breeding a bold stripe to a bold stripe, and you produce another bold stripe. Some of those lines are called specific names, which are like line bred traits. But it's kind of hard with leopard geckos because there's a lot of different names for all the different lines out there. So it's easy to get confused. So if I was to tell you like, oh, this is an electric, or this is a blood, or this is a inferno, or this is a gecko genetics, or this is a mandarin, you would have no idea like what I'm talking about right now.
Nope.
So all those things actually equal a tangerine leopard gecko, which is just line bred for orange color. But they're different lines of them. So what do you work with most? Corn snakes or?
Yeah, we work with some other things, but yeah.
So if somebody came out with a corn snake, it was little orange, and they called it like, I don't know, vitamin C, whatever, or the nectarine or whatever. But they're all from the same line. That's kind of how we feel in leopard geckos. So it's yeah, some of the lines deserve names, and most of them don't.
We've actually been talking about that a lot lately, and I feel very strongly that most of the names don't deserve anything.
Well, people want to market their animals right off the bat and say this is something unique to them. So I think it's more of a...
Yeah, I get it. It's hard to like tell people no as well. If I marketed every single tangerine that I had, like I'd have like 20, 40 of them that I would say are like totally unique and different crosses. And like, do you take like an electric a leopard gecko and cross it to a blood and then call it something new? No, you should call it electric blood cross, unless it's completely different, looks completely different.
Preach.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got to just completely look different, and it's got to be something new. Got to be something that you worked on for a lot of years.
Exactly. You can't pop out one and be like, "Oh, look!" Like, no, that's not how life works.
So whatever problem you're working with corn snakes, it's like 50 times worse with leopard geckos. So there's a lot of people coining their new line name or whatever it is. Some of them stick, and I've kind of come to the idea that if it's worth it, it will stick. And I'm not going to hate on people that make a new name because it's just not going to stick with the community. So there's a lot of drama, just like with any other reptile. There's a ton of drama with leopard geckos. So I just try to stick with stuff that's going to really stick with the hobby.
And what is this cipher stuff that I'm seeing all over your Facebook? What is that exactly?
So one of the rare occasions where we get an actual new base morph, and it's a little strange that I actually hatched this out of my collection. So I don't breed I'm not a mass scale breeder or a mill breeder, where most of these morphs come out of. So either they come out of wild caught animals or they come out of mill breeders for the most part. It's just a sheer like numbers game. If you hatch something out that's a new morph out of your collection, it's kind of like winning the lottery. So the guys that get like the new morphs are either getting some wild animals that are showing it, or they have big collections. But I test breed a lot, and I across a lot of stuff, and I'm always checking things out, and I probably have a better eye than a lot of people about things. So in 2015, I caught these couple geckos that came out of a certain project that were just totally weird. And they had a reverse stripe, solid eyes, color enhancer came later on. But yeah, ended up since 2015 testing them out and working with them. I got a full blown recessive, you know. I mean, this is like recessive, like Paul by or what are some other recessives out there, like Trimper albino or rainwater albino, or I don't know. So it's full blown recessive that's coming out of leopard geckos, which is a big deal. Not a line bred, not a polygenic morph. You know, everybody's got a polygenic.
Is this like, I don't know how long or how often like new morphs come on the block.
Right,
for
is it 1 in a million or?
Yeah, like how often are you seeing?
Yeah. If it maybe even more, because back in the day when they were importing them from Pakistan, they were coming in on numbers, and the morphs are coming in with imports. So you get somebody local that would see a albino or whatever it was and import it. So all the morphs came in originally as imports. It's just kind of like ball pythons, you know. You got to kind of think of it as ball pythons imports just completely stopped, and then like everybody had to just rely on like captive breeding for new genetics. So yeah, this is one of the few captive bred genetics that have come out, and I don't actually think it's like spontaneous from wild type stuff. It came out of like stuff that I bred. So very big, very different than a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff is just like, oh, I got some heads from the wild that came out like this. I don't think it's I think it's all captive bred here.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that the rate of mutation is going to be the same whether it's a wild animal or in your collection. So you just kind of like, the more animals you have,
the more chance
you have, although it's still very slim. I mean, you obviously got super lucky, but you also have numbers to back it up, so you had more of a shot. But is this something to where, I mean, how do you launch like a morph per se, you know, in this space in leopard geckos?
And were you faced with criticism when you launched?
Yeah, are people like, because as soon as you put out a new morph, most places it's either
people down your throat immediately.
Yeah.
So kind of what was your experience with that?
So I didn't even release any information for since 2015. So 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So 5 years of breeding. So I really took it slow, to be honest.
That's a long. You must be a really good secret keeper, because I wouldn't be able to wait that long.
Well, I almost went 6 years, but another breeder that got one other gecko from me hatched one out, and so I kind of had to like speed it up a little bit. So yeah, it's just I felt like I needed to know everything about it before I released it. And I wasn't, you know, a new morph doesn't come along very often at all. And I'm not even over, like, you got to really realize that this is a 1 in a million. Like, this doesn't happen at all. Especially something like this where it's an eye gene, complete pattern changer, a complete color enhancer. Everything about it's cool, you know, completely different. Leopard geckos, if you look at leopard geckos and you look at cool leopard geckos, you're looking at an albino plus a tangerine, an albino plus a bold albino. Like, you're looking at stuff that's like one recessive that's kind of boring, and then you're looking at a line breeding aspect to that. This thing has just completely changed the game. And Lemon frost did that in a lot of ways. Not sure if you're familiar with lemon frost with leopard geckos, but it was a big change in the leopard gecko world. But the problem is it was too good to be true. And, you know, pretty much all the lemon frost geckos ended up developing tumors. It was just too much, you know. Sometimes when you have a gene that creates such a good phenotype, it's just not going to work. And that was what happened with the lemon frost. Unfortunately, I spent $6,000 on them myself.
God.
Well, I was there at the Tinley when they auctioned them off, and I think Steve Sykes paid, I believe it was $13,000 or $16,000 or for the
He
pair.
paid $10,000 for the first female, but she ended up dying. Yeah, it was, you know, whatever. If I would have known like everything about him, obviously I wouldn't have paid that. I wouldn't have paid anything for him. But
Right.
Steve Sykes, you know, he had a golden opportunity with those, and he capitalized on it. And you know, he was stuck in a really hard situation. He got stuck with a gecko he spent a lot of money on, a morph that he spent a lot of money on, that he was selling off to a lot of people for a shit boat of money. I mean, there's probably $300,000-$400,000 involved in that, you know, and so it's hard. It's hard for somebody like that to say no, you know, or to speak up. But, you know, it is what it is. I feel sorry for him in some ways I don't, you know.
And that was such a big deal. I mean, do you feel like it shakes the confidence of people whenever there is a new morph coming out? I mean, do you feel like it's improve?
For sure. For sure. With mine, that's part of the reason I even delayed. You know, I was like, I got to make sure this stuff is not weird, nothing weird about it, nothing going on. It's just a different morph, you know. My morph is a color enhancer, but it not to the level of lemon frost. Lemon frost was just like extreme. It just took a normal gecko and took. So what happened with lemon frost is iridophore cells were enhanced, and there was an imbalance in those. And when that imbalance happened, it caused tumors to happen in the cells, and that also happened in the eyes and the liver, all around the gecko. It happened, and so you had a lot of people thinking like, it could be possibly line bred and something we could work out. But the thing is, like, if you're breeding like a dark gecko to that gecko and keeping, like, you know, those iridophore cells on a lower level, you can get to that level where you're not going to produce as many that have the tumors. But the second you send it off to somebody that breeds it to a tangerine or to a hypo or something with more color to it, it's all on again. And so that's what happened. I knew it was going to happen from the beginning because I saw all lemon frost would develop it, because I was breeding them all to tangerines, and every person I talked to that bred them to tangerines had the problem. The second they were bred to wild types, they kind of slowed down. There wasn't as many problems. So I felt like it was a waiting game. Anybody that bred it to a wild type and sold it off as clean, you know, that next person's going to breed to a tangerine or something that has more color to it, and then all of a sudden it's going to pop out again. So it was sad in a lot of ways, and it, you know, could have worked out, but it was just too nice. It was too nice to work.
I can't have nice things.
And was that kind of is that like a turning point as far as the market goes? I mean, you had this new gene that came in. Everyone, I mean, did you see a lot of people get out of it because of that? I mean, they spent a lot of money.
Right. What was the fallout?
There was a big fallout, especially for me, I don't really care too much because I deal with super high-end leopard geckos. But in China, I saw a little bit for sure. Japan a little bit. Those guys, they bought a lot of limmerfrost, and they paid a lot of money for them. And to be screwed that bad, in the long run, and try to defend it, it's sad when, they spend that much money and they get screwed on it. And even the people in the US, I knew people that had taken out maxed out their credit cards to pay for that stuff.
That's so disappointing.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that shouldn't have bought them in the first place, to be honest. I couldn't believe the people that bought them, some of them, it's like, why are you doing this? Even myself, having the genetics that I have, I barely decided to buy them. And it was at that point where I knew that I could do stuff that other people couldn't. That was the only reason I decided to purchase stuff for that much. But if I had what most of the people had in the US, to spend $3,000 on a pair or, 50, whatever it was crazy money.
So
to spend.
What is, I guess, the closest thing to a lemon-frost that does not cause all these?
Cypher.
Well, Cypher is completely different, 100%. So it's not a color enhancer to that extent. So it does enhance the color, but it doesn't turn it into a full bloom. If you were talking about flowers, it would be like just a full bloom of flowers with limmerfrost. Cypher is like, hey, we're taking your kind of normal leopard gecko and we're making it kind of we're taking it from a C to a B plus. So yeah,
combination of animals, obviously. That's going to be a big
can bring it
enhancer
to an A+.
to current projects. Yeah,
I kind of feel the weird thing is though that the Cypher is in a gecko that is completely normal at this point, and it makes them look really cool at this point. So if I put it into a tangerine, even a little bit, I kind of feel like it's going to be really nice. And regardless, it's more obvious than a white and yellow, which a white and yellow was a huge deal in the leopard gecko world. It's way more obvious than a leopard gecko or a white and yellow. It's almost black and white when you hatch them out. It's it would be unless you're breeding it to an eclipse and it's somehow that's a crossover when you're talking about genetics. So wouldn't really work anyway. So, it's something pretty definite. And I just hatched a few right now that were crossed to tangerines that were, the siblings are completely banded, just normal. And then the visuals are just have that stripe and just completely patternless and everything. So it's big. It's bigger than, it's as big as I would expect, or want. If it was bigger than this, I would kind of worry about it, to be honest.
That's going to cause some sort of issue.
Yeah, it's if it was better than this, the issues might come up, But I've had them since 2015. No issues.
So. Yeah, and it also seems like more money, more problems. If your leopard geckos seem pretty, this whole thing seems pretty fragile. This have big money on, and it's a lot of pressure on your shoulders, it would seem.
Oh yeah, leopard geckos are. Yeah, if you're newer in the hobby, a lot of people, they kind of expect that you're going to be an idiot in a lot of ways, or kind of, not care that much. But at my point where I'm at, if I screw up, it's a big deal. So I'm honest. 100% across the board. And I try to be as honest as possible. In leopard geckos, that's kind of a rare thing. So, honestly, if you were just honest in leopard geckos, like, we can do well. It's weird, but like leopard geckos are just one of those things where it's a lot of fun. You're breeding, I bred 80 plus species of geckos, a lot of rhinus, a lot of boa constrictors, a lot of different species. And the incubator is just more fun than anything I've ever dealt with, and that's why I've stuck with it. And I know the drama on Facebook, but you're going to have that with ball pythons and all kinds of stuff. You're going to always have the drama and stupid people on Facebook. But I've learned to deal with it better, and I've learned to not overreact to Facebook. I've always had my own website. So now with the Facebook problems, it's helped out. So I'm not worried about it. I'll do what I do, and I'll love what I do. If, one thing that's always happened, if my sales suck, I start advertising more because I have more time. And if the sales are good, I don't advertise. And the thing is, I've always had good sales since, for a while. So it's always been about the reptiles first. People that, message me on email or Facebook or whatever that are, I try to accommodate everybody, but there's obviously some people that haven't done any research whatsoever, but I try to help them out. And I realized that I was that idiot at one point, or that ignorant person at one point. I can only imagine like John Boone when he was dealing with my emails back in the day, or, some of the guys that dealt with me. So, I just one of those things. Anyway.
Yeah, especially when you're dealing with, you're probably a little bit higher level, but still, I mean, even designer leopard geckos, I'm sure some of them fall into just pet market. I mean, people are willing to spend $200 on a very nice pet leopard gecko or something like that. So are you dealing with a lot of like first-time pet owners?
Oh, yeah. I've always sold the pet market as well. Just because I felt that there was a lot of people that didn't want to buy from the chain pet stores and didn't want to support that. And I still feel that way. I've increased my prices on my pet geckos, but I promise those people that I'm going to give them a good gecko, and that I'm going to give them quality and something that's feeding right, something that doesn't have crypto, which most of chain pet stores, at least 30% have crypto. And they still sell out. It's still my number one seller. So it's tough because those people ask the most questions. They're difficult sometimes. But I want those people to be involved because they're like the first time gecko breeder. I think like 10 years later, or probably not that long, but maybe like 5 years later, and they might be the person that I'm talking to you about selling my $500 Firebolt or whatever, So, yeah, leopard, the pet market, yes, but more high end, more stuff that people would, appreciate.
Yeah.
I don't think any pet reptile should be sold under $50, to be honest. Yeah. Like, I think at that point you get people that just don't care. They don't care about the animal. There's a problem with it. They're weighing out whether that reptile is worth more than $50 or not when they go to the vet. So for me, it's like I keep a lot of geckos around that are they'll be a little deformed, but I think they make really good pets. And sometimes I post them on my page, and I sell a deformed gecko that is worth, $20 plus $45 shipping, $65 to the person. And that gecko makes a great pet for the rest of their lives. And it had a slight deformity. whereas if they went to the chain's pet store, the thing's sold in mass and sold in, when shipped, it's shipped in paper like bags, like filled with hundreds of geckos. And so I think it's a better route forward for the hobby.
Yeah. And man, it's such a difference that the more expensive the snake in our case, the easier the customer, unfortunately. So when you're dealing, if you got to sell like $25 geckos, it would just be a nightmare, or corn snakes for that matter.
I think it's the same across the board, but yeah, leopard geckos, entry level reptile, bearded dragon, of course. They're both going to be tough. I don't try to cater to that person. I try to cater to the person that's gone online and actually searched it out, and then gone to my website and saw like, hey, my pet geckos are $40 plus shipping. It's a lot of money. Like, at that point, I know that person cares about that animal. They're not going to spend 85 plus for a gecko to, just to, not care about it at all. So I don't mind catering to that person. I would, all day rather cater to that person than somebody that's, screw it, a reptile, whatever.
And because you kind of sell that next level, a little bit more expensive leopard gecko, when you do shows, do you feel like a majority of the people coming to you have already like found your website? Or
you do shows at all?
Oh yeah. Sorry. I should.
Yeah. So I'm in Idaho now, and there's no shows around me. I can drive out to California, or I would like to drive out to Tinley, or fly. If I fly, the problem is trying to get all my stuff out there. So shows at this point are fun. I can do decently at a show, but if I'm going to do a show, it might be like overseas at this point.
Do you ship internationally to Ham or China?
Yeah, Ham. I've been invited to Ham a lot of times, to Japan quite a few times as well. So I might do Japan the next time around, because those people they're obsessed with like a lot of stuff I have. So it would be fun. It would just be fun to go there, like, in my opinion. So I've done Tinley before, but I think when I was living in Colorado at the time I did Tinley. So I drove 18 hours to get there and back. And it was a lot of fun. It was worth it for, what I spent and made out of there. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, where I'm at now, there's no shows in Idaho. There's nothing going on. So if I'm going to do local shows, it'll be California at this point, which I've done before, and they're fun. But
are there a lot of leopard gecko breeders that do Tinley?
Oh yeah, Tinley's like the big leopard gecko. Well, at least was the big leopard gecko show for everybody. Used to be Daytona. But in the U.S., typically Daytona, Tinley, and the super shows in California, specifically Super Show Pomona, San Diego, and whatever the Northern California one is. But I used to live near the Pomona show in California. It's okay. A lot of people are fake there, which kind of upsets me. But
so you there are
Tinley, like, if you guys can do Tinley, do Tinley. Like, that's some real people, a lot of nice people that are, really about the hobby, really about the animals. I felt like every time I was in California, it was all about money. Like, to be honest, not everybody, of course, but
there's more of the factor there.
Tinley was just, cool. And it was like all about the animals, and everybody was having fun, and like, you weren't dealing with the business person out there,
So are you going this year?
I would like to, but I'm pretty far away now. So I moved from Colorado to Idaho now. So I'm
to For the fun of it.
Dang.
Yeah, it's at least 24 hours drive now, so I gotta fly.
Yeah.
I'm not driving 24 hours to Tinley. So if I fly, I'll go, and it'll be just for fun. I have all the show equipment. I got all the acrylic setups and everything, but just not. There's nobody out. There's like 2 leopard gecko breeders out here total. And they're not really that into it. So
I would think also like your shipping season would be pretty small in Idaho too.
It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I've had about 3 weeks where it's been kind of hot. I've always been obsessed with going to the ship center to drop off. Maybe that's my problem, but I always drop off at the ship center. So I've always made it a point to go to the ship center on Mondays and Wednesdays. And so I don't ship any other days. I just ship Mondays and Wednesdays. And I've always found that customers will fall into those 2 days. Occasionally you get somebody that's really weird and they won't want to ship one of those days, but it's very odd to have that. So I make it a point, because this is my livelihood and everything I do. So I go to the ship centers Mondays and Wednesdays, and everybody falls in line with that pretty much. If the weather's too hot, then it's too hot. But I'm really good at shipping. So I try not to brag about much, but shipping is one thing that, I can pretty much ship no matter what. It's very rare that I don't ship.
Even in the winter?
Yeah, winter is actually better, to be honest. Summer right now is the hardest time of year for me, just because it can get, above 95 plus. But wintertime, no problem. I mean, it can be, I'll ship to Alaska when it's 10 degrees, no problem. But I'm not saying for everybody to do that, of course. I don't want anybody to hear this and be like, open pack a box with a heat pack and think they can ship to Alaska in 10-degree weather. So shipping has to do with oxygen, how much oxygen you're applying to that package, and also how much heat you're applying to that package. So if you're using like one of those heat packs, those things are burning oxygen, but also your gecko is. But your gecko is burning a lot less. You can get away with very little oxygen in that package. So you can put, like, if it's a 3/4 inch foam, you can put 1 hole in that with a heat pack and ship it off in 10-degree weather, no problem. But the second you try to do something like, you don't put any holes in it and you ship it off with that package, probably not, but maybe you get too little oxygen in there. If you're using the wrong heat pack, that's number 1 to kill the gecko or reptile in general. There's a lot of factors, but yeah, if you don't have to worry too much about the hubs. Hubs can be a problem if there's thunderstorms. Thunderstorms will delay a package. Just keep that in mind. Not really the heat or the cool. It'll just be the delay. So if there's a thunderstorm at Memphis, I pretty much stop shipping. But
you're packing these to the extent to where if they're 24 hours in a box wherever, they're pretty much good to go.
Yeah, I look at weather for the destination out 2 days every time I ship. I write down the highs and lows for that area for 2 days. And then for Memphis, which for where I'm at, everything goes through Memphis or Oakland. For Memphis, I always check it out a couple days as well. Memphis is usually just the thunderstorm. So if you're looking at a bunch of thunderstorms late at night, yeah, you're probably going to get delayed. But usually it's not a big deal. The delays with going to the destination, though, if you're looking at delay in Memphis, so there's a bunch of thunderstorms in Memphis, there's a delay at the where it's going to, say it's like especially if it's like a 4:30 delivery or 12 delivery, where it's going to and it's a little bit hot, hot, scratch it. A little bit cool, you're always fine. I've never had an issue with cool weather. I've never had a dead on arrival in all the years shipping, except for one deformed gecko that had issues before, and this never was doing well before or after. So like it just died in natural causes. So use the real like reptile heat packs, the 40-hour like unit packs. You guys can, let's see. This is my whole box collection over there.
I know too well.
Good.
Mine. No, but do you see how his is? This is how I want yours to be, not all over our dining room table.
So I have those, and then I have like tons of extra down below in the basement. But
You won't put
these are all my
no.
So I have like all the boxes below and then above. But yeah, and then I have all kinds of stuff for shipment. But anyway, heat is always what you got to worry about. Don't worry about the cool so much. Your geckos or your snakes or whatever, like they take 40 degree, 30 degree weather all the time. Naturally, like for instance, leopard geckos, everybody freaks out when they get above or below like 80 degrees. And it's like their whole, where they're at gets below 80 degrees all the time, So, I mean, as long as I've seen plenty of geckos get to literally freezing and bounce back. The second they get above like 95, 96, done. Yeah.
Well, speaking of done, we have reached our 2 hours.
I feel like there's something, one more thing. I just feel like because you have someone who's doing it full time, and it seems like so many people talk about, it's all good and fun until you're doing it full time, then it takes the fun out of it. And it seems like you're still interested in like very small aspects of the hobby. He
finds new challenges,
into new things. So it's like, how do you keep yourself from being down and out about the whole business part of it?
It's actually a very, very important question, because it is true. Like you get to this point and you lose your interest. And I have lost my interest for sure in a lot of ways. I would say find something that really keeps it going, for one. Leopard geckos, and if you're breeding the same, so for instance, I was breeding Goniosaurus for a while. Goniosaurus are like the cave geckos, which are like pretty, you've seen them from mainland China and, Japanese cave geckos. So I was breeding those for a while, and they were a lot of fun to breed at first. And then after hatching out the 50th of the same species, it got to the point where I was like, I'm not having that much fun when I'm hatching these out. So, it's hard to say like what's going to spark your interest like with everybody. But for me with leopard geckos, it was just the fact that I was hatching out really cool stuff all the time. And kind of like if I took a picture of the stuff I was hatching out, like tons of people would be interested in it. So it's kind of not world's first or anything stupid like that, but like just like really cool geckos every time you hatch them out. And then with leopard geckos, actually, they like, if you start them off, so say they start off at 3 or 4 grams, at 10 grams, they're different than what they were at that point. And then at 20 grams, they're different. And 30 grams are different. And so every point I reached, it was just like, I would have fun, like feeding them, feeding a couple hundred, 300, 400, 500 leopard geckos. like got to the point where I was like, whoa, that's cool. Let's go take a picture of that, share it with people or whatever. So,
like, oh, I forgot I had this.
Yeah, it
This
kind of
looks-
reminds you.
or it looks different this time.
trust me, with leopard geckos, that's what it is all the time. You don't even like leopard geckos don't look similar from day 1 to day 10 at all. You can almost not even recognize them. So a lot of the fun with leopard geckos, if you're doing the really high end, nice leopard geckos, they really change really quick. And yeah, a lot of the fun and a lot of the interest that I've had and kept with it. You know, I've been doing this for leopard geckos at least 10 years straight. I still sit out there with a flashlight and I'm checking in on the leopard geckos in the incubator. And, you know, every time I see like today, I saw 3 new ones and all of them are different. All of them are just slightly different. And then 2 weeks from now, they're different. And then 4 weeks from now, they're different. Like you wouldn't even recognize them in 4 weeks from what they hatch out. So
it helps that, you know, you have a lot of different things to work with as far as genetics and different looks and lines and stuff like that.
Yeah, it of course, the more stuff you have and the better stuff you have, it makes a difference for sure. But people can start off and they can just like I always recommend people who are starting off with leopard geckos just start with line bred stuff, you know, like polygenic traits like bolds and tenderines, and like I do fire bolds a lot. Those are incredible to start off with, and every time you hatch them out, you're surprised. You know, you're not seeing the same thing in the incubator every time. So, you know, if you're breeding one species and that's it, like, so for leopard geckos, you could breed like Angramanu or Fuscus or Hardwicke or whatever, like one of the species, it's always going to look about the same, you know, no matter what. It's cool to hatch out for sure, but the second you hatch out something that's new, I think it's the same thing, same reason people are drawn to ball pythons. I don't work with ball pythons and never have, and I know a little bit about them, but leopard geckos are similar in a lot of ways, and they have a lot of base recessive morphs and a lot of incomplete dominance, and you know, a lot of stuff to work with, and it's fun for sure.
I think the most attractive thing, or one of the most attractive things, is the fact that you can get a world-class gecko. I mean, the ball python, the really awesome morphs typically are pretty high dollar, but you can get a world-class gecko for a good price, you know, something that's reasonable.
Yeah, that's right. Like with the new morph, the Cypher, I had people complaining in Japan about the price on hits, and I'm like, what are you complaining about this for? Like, look at ball python hits, like for a new morph, could you imagine? You know, like if there was a new or whatever it was in ball pythons, whatever morph it was, if it was a het for that and you were selling that, can you imagine that being $1,500 or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Not even comparable, you know? But the thing is with leopard geckos, there's more people that want them, you know, it's crazy. So that's the thing. I'm not trying to gouge the market or anything, but I'm just like, I'm not going to undersell myself either. So
yeah, you want to establish some reasonable market for these things because you value the animal and you value your customers too. You don't want someone to produce 100 of them and then sell them for $200 each and crash the market for all your customers as well. And that just doesn't serve anyone.
Yeah, I don't breed that much either. So I'm not one of the mill breeders that are producing, you know, for instance, like the Lemon Frost, those are produced by a bunch of mill breeders that were going to produce tons of them the first year. And even in that case, you still wanted them, but I'm not anywhere near that level. So I may produce 1,000 a year where those guys are producing 100,000. So there's a big difference there, you know. Yeah. So I'm also not selling to just anybody too. I'm going to sell with people that I care about and friends and, you know, whatever, but it'll it'll go to the right hands first of all, and then, you know, we'll see from there.
Absolutely. So it was great learning about all that. I'm sure this is all, I mean, this whole leopard gecko thing is new to us in general,
100% new.
but I'm glad we could fill in the listeners who are more keen on leopard
Yeah,
gecko.
I think the main point is leopard geckos are fun. Man. I trust me, from somebody who bred boa constrictors and bred over 90 species of other geckos and ranus and all kinds of stuff. Leopard geckos are a lot of fun. And even though, as long as you can get past the drama, which all reptiles have, get past the drama, you know, it's going to be a lot of fun.
100%.
Awesome. If someone wanted to reach out to you, what is the best way they can get in contact with you?
Just my website, geckoboa.com. I'm not desperate for people's attention or anything like that. So I just, you know, if people are interested in high-end leopard geckos, that's what I'm into. You know, do your research. I make my website pretty all-encompassing. So if people want to know genetics about leopard geckos, like, they can find out most information on there. I'm not there to answer like the real basic questions, but, you know, I don't mind helping out people who have done their research either. So
I think it was great that I believe it's your contact sheet right above it. It says, my leopard gecko isn't eating. Click here. Like, please read this instead of messaging me the same question that I get every
it's you got to understand, with leopard geckos, it's way more common than with anything else that people just don't even try or don't even care. So I try to make, like, the problem is my website, it's like got all the information people need, but it's almost too much in a way. So it's like the right balance between like enough that they're going to actually look at it and like actually, you know, pay attention to what's going on there. So I have to have that right balance on my website. So sometimes it's too much information.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to everyone who watched us and / listen to this in the future. If you're listening to the audio, if you're listening to the audio version later, if you want to get in contact with us, Port City Pythons on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. We have sneaks available on our website, portcitypythons.com. And if you really want to email us, theportcitypythons@gmail.com. And we will see people in the Maryland area in 3 weeks at the Havre de Grace show, September 7th. And we will see people in the Philly surrounding area, September 14th at the Oak show.
Yeah. And then we have York, Pennsylvania, and then hopefully White Plains. It's going to be a busy
Wait, we're doing the York, Pennsylvania show?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe we aren't.
Well,
potentially
I didn't say it because I didn't know we were doing it. Okay.
Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you, John Scarborough of Geckoboa. Sorry, I said Burrow that time again. Scarborough.
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 Scarborough. I've been saying Burrow. Okay. Sorry. Scarborough. Gotcha.
Yeah, between Eublepharis or whatever and
Eublepharis,
you know, things are just all mixed and mumbled. There's not a lot of new words today. And what's the
we still can't say that one. I say angry.
Angry man.
And I don't even know if I'm saying it right. So hopefully.
Turkmenistan. Okay.
I like that one. Turkmenicus. That's my favorite.
Yeah. Anyway, we're getting off on a
We're just rambling on words we can't say. So thank you and have a good night, everybody.